Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama has announced he's running for governor of his home state. The football coach turned lawmaker announced his run yesterday with the launch of a campaign website. This was long anticipated. Tuberville, a staunch ally of President Trump, enters the race as the favorite to replace current Governor Kay Ivey, who's finishing her second term. Tuberville is the second sitting senator to launch a bid for governor this year, following Democratic Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado. And the coach to senator pipeline could continue in Alabama. One of the names being floated to replace Tuberville is Auburn's men's basketball coach, Bruce Pearl. Joining us now, congressional reporter for the news publication Notice, Daniela Diaz. Daniela, we'll get to coach in just a minute, but first let's start with Musk, saying a bill can be big and it can be beautiful, but it can't be both. You think Republican lawmakers are going to be happy to hear that sentiment from a guy who they've championed and defended his work?
Absolutely not. What's interesting is that he's deciding to say this while everyone's out of Washington. You noted earlier that the Senate is out, Allie. House and Senate lawmakers are currently back in their home states, meeting with constituents to talk about this one big, beautiful bill on both sides. Getting the heat about, potential Medicaid cuts, about the lack of deficit spending that some conservatives said that they had to do to be able to pass this bill in the House last week to go back home. So hearing this from Elon is really interesting because he hasn't really weighed in on this legislation leading up to this moment. He's kind of been disappearing from the limelight in the past couple of weeks, which we've all been covering pretty closely. But next week, the Senate is going to take up this bill. And this is someone that Republicans have looked to, especially with these DOGE cuts, as exactly a champion for the Republican agenda. So him saying this could potentially complicate things when the Senate takes up this legislation, which is already going to be complicated because they do not like the version that the House Republican conference passed. But then also just curious to see how they're going to move forward once it goes back to the House. And you need to get all those Republicans back on board. And we saw how incredibly difficult that was last week for Speaker Mike Johnson. Yeah, we've talked about the balancing act here. So as if it wasn't complicated enough, Elon Musk entering the chat, further complicating the situation potentially. We're going to dig into more of Musk a little bit later in the show. But for now, I want to pivot a little bit to that news about Tommy Tuberville running for governor back home in Alabama. He had a short, but I think notable tenure here in Washington, specifically for the way that he held up all of those Defense Department promotions over the course of, what was it, a year ago, 2 years ago now. But this is something that we end up seeing, people leaving office and running for other positions. Talk about, the retirements list, the people who are questing for other office. It's not just Tuberville, it's Michael Bennet, but then there's also a bunch of House members who have higher aspirations as well. Exactly, Allie. I mean, it's really interesting when they won't publicly say it, but I talk to lawmakers on Capitol Hill on both sides every day. Yeah. And it's just a very not fun place to work these days. And they will tell you that. Some of them even on the record, but for the most part, they're trying to figure out what they can do other than being in Congress when it's so dysfunctional. But it's interesting that you note specifically about the blockade that Senator Tuberville had about 2 years ago. It was 10 months where he was blocking military nominees over the military's abortion stance and policies. That really soured his relationship with Republicans on the Hill. And that might be a key reason for why he decided he would only serve one term and would return back to Alabama. But it's important to note that these members really don't love what they're doing on Capitol Hill. It's been really difficult for them on both sides. Democrats in the minority seeking office elsewhere, Republicans saying, this is actually a lot harder than what I thought it would be. Let me go seek higher office elsewhere. So that's what we're seeing take place. And this won't be the last announcement we'll see in the next 2 years before the next election. No, I think that's right. I mean, there's also an open question about when you're talking about people running for governor, who ends up running for governor in New York? Is it Elise Stefanik? Is it Mike Lawler? Both of them clearly are putting feelers out right now to see what their aspirations could be there. So we're talking about razor-thin margins in the House, potentially meaning people could miss votes. We'll end up seeing what that ultimately looks like. But there's a lot more of these kinds of announcements to come for sure. But when you're also talking about seeking higher positions, you can also do that by being in the House. And with the sad death of Jerry Connolly, that does leave open the top oversight committee position. And it's a four-way race that's going to, I think, tell us a lot about generational tensions within the caucus, what kind of leadership Hakeem Jeffries is going to back behind the scenes privately to be elevated. Just walk us through the contours of this race and why it matters. Yeah, Jerry Connolly, his death, obviously very sad. House Democrats really try to give time for that, to mourn that. But now, obviously, his position on this really key committee that publicly fights back against the Trump administration and its policies. That's why it's so important for Democrats to have a frontward-facing Democrat who's, a good communicator, good on TV in this role. They're going to start looking for who could replace him. It's a four-way race right now with Robert Garcia from California, Mufumi of Maryland, Stephen Lynch, who's currently acting as the top Democrat on this committee of Massachusetts, and Jasmine Crockett of Texas. So again, we're seeing what took place in December between Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Jerry Connolly. This established Democrat who's older, who's been in sort of several terms in Congress, who's maybe not as well known, versus, a fresher face, diverse, progressive. And so we're going to see what the Democratic caucus does when they return for this election on June 24th. So just a couple of weeks. And they're going to meet as a caucus and decide who should be this frontward-facing role of this very key committee that gets a lot of airtime on TV, that gets, has a lot of viral moments. But right now, it seems like it's really anyone's to get. There's not really a clear front runner after, especially Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said a couple of weeks ago, she's not interested in that top job.
Yeah, I do think this is ultimately going to tell us a lot, both about Democrats, but also about the role that Hakeem Jeffries plays as sort of the committee kingmaker behind the scenes. Is he someone who falls in line with the way that Pelosi used to do things, which is seniority and loyalty are rewarded? Is he someone who leans into the concerns that many in the caucus have voiced, to you, to me, to others, about the fact that their message is not getting out there? And someone like Jasmine Crockett or someone like Robert Garcia have been able to grab the attention mantle and hold it, not just during the 2024 campaign when Crockett was a consistent surrogate on the road, but then also as she has come back to Congress and had many a viral moment. I think we're ultimately going to learn a lot about how that plays out. June 24th, right?
June 24th, caucus-wide. It'll be a really interesting observation of the caucus and see what happens.
Yeah, we're just looking for plot points now, trying to draw some conclusions. Daniela Diaz, my partner in that, as always. Thank you, my friend.